And let me tell you about the time I went from goals to growth. You see, first of all, I had a mentor who shared with me when I was in my young 20s. He asked me, he said, "John, do you have a personal growth plan?" And I did not. I didn't even know I was supposed to have a personal growth plan. And that day, he shared with me a statement that just literally changed my life. He said, "John, growth is not automatic. You do not automatically grow and get better." He also told me that if you want to go into automatic, getting older is automatic. Getting better is not automatic. So there's a difference between getting older and getting better. And he challenged me to have a personal growth plan. Wow. I'll never forget that. A little later, I listened to Earl Nightingale, who said, and this is where I made the shift from goals to growth, because I started off in my personal growth being very goal-oriented. And then I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you would spend 1 hour a day, every day for 5 years, get the picture, 1 hour a day, every day for 5 years, on the same subject, that after 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. And I loved leadership. I was just learning leadership. And I thought, okay, I love this challenge. I'm going to take it. I'm going to spend an hour every day on the subject of leadership, every day for 5 years. And by the time I'm 30, I'm going to become an expert on leadership. So off I went. And every day I intentionally spent an hour in leadership. I read leadership books, material. I talked to leaders. I asked questions. I practiced leadership on a daily basis. I just did everything I could in the area of leadership every day. And I was thinking about that 5-year kind of time piece that Earl Nightingale gave me. And so I started literally counting down to 5. It's like 5, 4, 3. I was kind of like Cape Canaveral, getting ready to blast off as a leadership expert. But something happened. About halfway in that process of every day intentionally learning leadership and counting down 5, 4, 3, about halfway in that process of 5 years, something happened within me. I began to be a better leader. I wasn't only learning leadership, I was doing leadership. And what I was learning was enlightening to me, and I was learning more than I could have ever thought about leadership, and I was doing more than I could have ever thought about leadership. And there was an inward change. I was growing. I could tell I was growing. I was different. I was getting better. I was improving. You see, for the first 2.5 years, I kept asking myself the question, how long will it take? How long will it take? How long will it take? Well, how long will it take? Well, Earl Nightingale said it'd take 5 years before I could be an expert in leadership. Well, okay, it's 5, 4, 3. How long will it take? How long will it take? But the moment that I had the personal growth change happen in my life, I quit asking the question, how long will it take? And I started asking the question, how far can I go? How far can I go? Now, if I'm asking the question, how long will it take? I'm on a timeline, a deadline, and I'm goal-oriented. And when I talk to people that are goal-oriented, by the way, I think setting goals is fine. I'm not anti-goals. But when I talk to people that are goal-oriented, when they reach their goal, they kind of look around and say, now, what's next? What's next? But the moment that I change from asking how long will it take, being goal-oriented, to how far can I go, being growth-oriented, all of it changed. I can promise you this, if you're growth-oriented, you'll reach all the goals that you ever had in life. But when you reach your goal, you won't ask yourself what's next because you know what's next, that you're continually learning, that you're continually growing. And what I did is I left the goals, I shifted from goals, which has a timeline, to growth, which has no finish line. I'm 73. I don't have a finish line in my life. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still curious. I'm still asking questions. Why? because I have a growth mindset, not a goal mindset. You see, when my mentor shared with me that growth is not automatic, he did me a huge favor, because one of the things I teach is I use this as a visual. I share with people all the time. I put my hand in the air like I am right now, and I can just say to them that growth is not automatic. That everything worthwhile in your life is uphill. Everything. If you're going to build a great panda restaurant, it's all uphill. There's no such thing as building a great panda restaurant without effort, without energy, without time, without commitment. You don't accidentally grow a great panda restaurant. It doesn't happen. It's never happened. It's not going to happen with you. It's not happening with anybody. Everything worthwhile is uphill. Now, if everything worthwhile is uphill, you can't be automatic going up the hill. You have to be intentional. Nobody automatically climbed a mountain. If you talk to somebody that's successful and said, how did you get on the top of the mountain? You never heard anybody say, oh my. I have no idea how I got up here. I just woke up and here I am on top. No. That person's not a great leader. They're on drugs. Come on. You know better than that. Everything worthwhile is uphill. So when you have a growth mindset, you are intentional to say that every day I'm going to go uphill. And the growth that I'm talking about means that you're going to have to continually make personal changes in your life, because it's impossible to grow without changing. Just as it's impossible to grow automatically, it's impossible to grow without making personal changes in your life. And that's always difficult for us because we like to stay in our comfort zone, and growth is not in your comfort zone. It's not in my comfort zone. It's outside of our comfort zone. In fact, here's what I would say to you. Everything that you need and want, but you don't have, is outside of your comfort zone. Everything. One of the advantages, I think, of COVID-19, it has knocked all of us out of our comfort zone, and it has caused us to what? Create. To think of another way to do business, think another way to serve our people, think of another way to add value to others. It's people say get out of the box. Well, COVID-19 kind of blew up the box, okay? But whenever we make changes, whenever we grow, it's uncomfortable. In fact, do me a favor, just cross your arms like I am right now. Would you please? That's it. Just cross your arms. Now, let me tell you what I know about you doing this with me. You've crossed your arms thousands of times, just like me. And guess what? Every time you cross your arms, you cross them the same way. Every time. And if you cross them the other way, it would be very uncomfortable to you because you're not used to it. In fact, let's just practice it for a moment. Take your arms and just cross them the other way. And it's so uncomfortable. I mean, as soon as we do this, we go, oh my gosh, we want to get right back to the way that we're comfortable doing it. Sure we do. I do, you do. Clasp your hands with me for a moment. Now, let me tell you something. You've done this thousands and thousands of times, and every time you do it the same way. Now, there's another way to clasp your hands, but you don't do it that way. I don't do it that way. I always do it the same way. Because if we do it the other way, it'll be uncomfortable because we're not used to doing it. Let's just take our fingers and move them over one, clasp our hands. Oh, my. That's very uncomfortable. I mean, we immediately go right back to what we love, what's comfortable, what makes us feel right. Now, I say that because that's exactly the challenge that you and I have. When we are going to grow and become the people we need to be, we're going to have to make some changes. I will. You will. In fact, I have a coaching company, the John Maxwell Team, that's very successful. In a little bit over 10 years, we become the largest coaching company in the world. We have, we have 39,000 coaches in 170 countries in the world. And people ask me all the time, how did you grow your company so quickly? And how have you been so successful? And I tell them it's because we have what I call a cycle of success. And I'm going to give that to you right now. It's very simple. I don't need to teach it very long, but you'll get the principle, and that's what I want you to get, the essence of what this success cycle looks like. And by the way, it's a cycle, okay? It's not a journey. You see, you can take a journey and never visit something again. You can pass it once and never see it again. That's a journey. A cycle, you continually do the same thing over and over again. But it's not that you're in a rut. Get the picture. If you can picture a cycle like this, you continually do the same thing, but every time you do them, you get better at them. And so it spirals upward for you. I just finished a mentoring call with a very good leader. I meet with him on the phone for an hour about every 3 months. And he's very successful. He is a top leader. And so we were having a conversation today, and he was talking about 18 months of leading people through COVID and very, very difficult times. And he was talking about the fact that he had just his business just expanded, I think, almost unrealistically for what he's gone through. But he said something interesting. He said, John, he said, we're really growing and things are going well. But he said, I'll have to admit, emotionally, I'm a little bit hard on myself right now. I'm not as happy as I thought I would be. He said, as I'm looking at this, I should be happier. I should be more excited. And I said, I'm happy. I'm excited. But he said, I just don't have the degree that I kind of thought I would have at this point. And he said, can you help me walk through that? And so I called him by name and I shared with him, I said, I think I understand where you are. And I said, where you are is this. For 18 months, you have been leading people uphill. You've all heard me talk about everything worthwhile is uphill, so I don't need to talk about that anymore. But the only difference between average leadership, which is always uphill, and COVID leadership is that it's just a steeper hill. And I said to him, you have been leading for 18 months uphill, bringing people along, encouraging, lifting, doing everything you could to help everybody finish the race, be successful, do better in their business, do better in their own personal life, family life. I said, you've been pulling people, pushing people, encouraging people, lifting people. And I said, I think what the challenge is you emotionally are just low on fuel. I said, what you know mentally and what you feel emotionally aren't the same. What you know mentally is this is a great accomplishment, what you're doing. But what you feel emotionally doesn't match that. And I said, it's going to take some time for you to refuel and build up your emotional tank again. And I want you to know that. And he was so grateful. We had a pretty good conversation about that. He said, John, I think you just helped me. Well, I'm coming from that mentoring conversation to our mentoring time together. And really, Aaron is the one who put this lesson before me and really developed a lot of it for me. And so we had some time together and we talked it through and we built the lesson for you. And I thought, how appropriate timing-wise to come out of one mentoring session of a very successful leader who just is emotionally a little bit tired and isn't maybe celebrating to the level that he thinks that he should. And now me talking to you. And why am I talking to you about an abundance mindset? Because I think over the last 18 months, the prominent emotion in most people's life has been fear. And so as a leader, you're having to lead people through this wilderness of uncertainty and fear and what's going to happen and what's happening to me. A lot of questions. And I think you have been pulling well, leading well, doing very well. I mean, look at Monet and look at how well you've done as a company this year. But I think you've had to work harder. You've had to work harder to get where you are. Booker T. Washington said, success is not where you have arrived. He said, success is what you had to go through to get where you are. And it's the going through to get where you are that sometimes just kind of wears us out a little bit. I was doing a lesson the other day for another company, and it was entitled How to Overcome Hard Times. And my opening statement to them is what I wanted to share with you right now. I said, if you want to overcome hard times, you have to go through hard times. Don't miss this. There's no such thing as vicariously leading others how to go through difficult times without going through them yourself. How do you develop leaders? They have to practice. They have to practice leadership. How do you lead during the hard times? Well, you have to go through those hard times yourself. So as leaders, you've gone through them, but now you're trying to bring your people through them at the same time. And what I want to do is I want to really focus now. Remember, what we focus on expands. So for these next few minutes, focus with me on abundance. If you and I are walking down a street and we're just breathing, okay, we're just walking, talking, we're breathing. Not one time do you look at me and say, John, do you think there's enough air to breathe? Not one time do I look at you and say, wow, we, measure your breaths because, gosh, we could run out of air. No. It never enters our mind because we have grown up in an environment of abundance, that there's plenty of air for all of us. But let's just say, for example, we're scuba diving. And in the scuba diving, all of a sudden, maybe one of the tanks malfunctions. And instead of having two tanks, we got to have one tank to get back up to the surface. And now all of a sudden, we're being very careful and we are measuring our breaths and we are asking each other, do we have enough air in that tank? Now, what I've just described is a scarcity mindset. And let me just say this. During adversity, it's okay for a brief time to go into scarcity. And the reason it's okay is because just as the scuba diving illustration is, we understand we got a problem. We only have one tank of air. We've got to get back to the surface. So now we have to measure our breaths. Now we are asking the question, is there enough air? And what I want you to know is during difficulties, during surprises, there's a tendency for us all to say, oh, what do I have? How much do I have? Again, the best way I can illustrate that is that, when COVID hit, probably the first 2 months, Mark and I continually discussed the issue of how do we make payroll and how do we keep people on board and how what adjustments do we have to make? And Mark, as a good leader, began cutting and pulling back. We did that so we could take care of our people because our people were first. But I mean, he had to make all kind of adjustments and he literally operated with there may not be enough money to go around. There may be issues we don't know about, and he took a scarcity mindset. Now, here's what I want you to catch: it's okay to have a scarcity mindset in an emergency. It's not okay when the emergency is over to stay in that type of thinking. That's what I don't want you to miss. And so many times, I think we allow what happened behind us or the experiences that we've had to begin to cause us to lead differently instead of leading abundantly. Again, we go back to the illustration I've given you before. Am I a river or am I a reservoir? A reservoir has a scarcity mindset. Hold the water. You may need it for not a rainy day. And the river is just flowing and giving and depositing water wherever it can or wherever it should. So we want to focus in this lesson purely on abundance. Now, Stephen Covey is the person who really, I think, gave us the breakthrough on abundance in his 7 Habits of Effective People. And if you'll let me, I'm going to read just a couple paragraphs in the book because I don't know if you've read it. By the way, if you haven't read the 7 Habits, I want to say that is a book you ought to read without any question. That is a classic book on leadership and even more, a classic book on success in life. And Stephen Covey was a terrific friend of mine and a terrific leader, and he tragically died a few years ago. But in fact, he wrote the foreword on my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, if you don't have the book, you need to get the book. I'm going to read a paragraph. In fact, when I read this couple paragraphs, you'll say, oh, I need to go get this book. Here's what Stephen said. Most people are deeply scripted in what I call a scarcity mentality. They see life as having only so much, as though there were only one pie out there. And if somebody were to get a piece of that pie, it would mean less for somebody else. The scarcity mentality is a zero-sum paradigm of life. People with scarcity mentality have a very difficult time sharing recognition and credit, power, or profit, even with those who help in the production. They also have a hard time being genuinely happy for the success of other people. Then Stephen Covey says, now let me contrast that to the abundance mentality. The abundance mentality flows out of a deep inner sense of personal worth and security. It is the paradigm that there is plenty out there and enough to spare for everybody. It results in the sharing of prestige, recognition, profits, and decision-making. It opens possibilities, options, alternatives, and creativity. Now, Stephen did a great job just giving us the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. I think probably you already had that, but I wanted to read from that classic book and again encourage you, if you don't have it, to purchase it. So let me now break it down for you. There are three very simple statements. They all kind of just go together. Just let me give them to you. Then we're going to build off of them. We're going to do some teaching. The first statement is that I see what I'm prepared to see. I don't see everything, and you don't see everything either. We don't see what is. We see what we're prepared to see. That's why two people can be in the same meeting and see totally different things. That's why a person can even go into a room and see, my gosh, I remember one time Margaret was at a conference with me, and so we were having lunch after the morning session, and she said, John, when the guy came up to you with the blue coat, well, you were in a conversation with him for a while. What did he ask? And I said, Margaret, I don't remember somebody talking to me in a blue coat. Oh, no. He was with you. You probably were there together for 4 or 5 minutes. He had a blue coat on, and he was like a foot away from you. You're talking. The guy in the blue coat, I'm just curious, what was the conversation about? Well, Margaret, I don't remember seeing a guy in a blue coat. Now, was a guy in a blue coat in front of me? Of course. He's 3 feet away from me. Did I see the blue coat? No. Why? Margaret is into colors and decoration. She's an artist. She can tell you what everybody is wearing and what colors they all have. I can tell you none of that. I don't. That isn't even where I am. I'm watching facial expressions, and I'm watching the lean in. I'm watching posture and everything. So now here's what I want you to understand is that this is huge. I see what I'm prepared to see. Now this is important because if I'm prepared to see scarcity, I will constantly see that there's not enough. If I'm prepared to see abundance, I will constantly see that there's more enough. Now, let me give you the second statement. The second statement is, what I see becomes reality to me. It's real. And so when somebody comes up to me and they have a scarcity mindset and they say, you know what, I think I don't think we're going to be able to make it. I look at them and I say, I think you're probably right. You won't be able to make it. Someone else comes up and they may be in the Monet and they say, my gosh, I think this is the sky is the limit. Yeah, I think you're right. You see, we not only see what we're prepared to see, but whatever we see, it becomes reality to us. So when a person lives in a scarcity mindset, what they're saying isn't wrong. I watch people trying to correct them all the time. No. What they see is what they see. It's reality to them. Just as a person in an abundance mindset, what they see, that's a reality too. Which brings me to the third statement. And the third statement is, how I view things determines how I do things. So all of my behavior comes out of how I see things. That's why this abundance mindset is absolutely huge. Stephen Covey, in his book, basically what he says is very simple. He said, in a world of scarcity, you constantly miss opportunity, even when abundance is all around you. What's he saying? You're not lacking opportunity because opportunity is not there. You're lacking opportunity because you're not seeing opportunity. You have a scarcity mindset. You see, scarcity equals the negative, which equals what I would call fearful emotions, where abundance equals belief or faith, which is positive emotions. So we both have it. I have within me, you have within you a scarcity emotion, and you have also an abundance emotion. You've got them both in you. There's no such thing as you are void of one. I have both belief and I have both fear. Okay? That's not the question. The question is, which of the two is the stronger? Because the stronger emotion always wins. Not sometimes wins, not usually wins. The stronger emotion always wins. So if my scarcity fear emotion is greater than my belief abundance emotion, then to be honest with you, I will recognize that some people are abundant, but I'll go right back into the fear pattern. And the reverse is also true. The stronger emotion always, not sometimes, the stronger emotion always wins. So, how do we control that? We control our emotions by our emotions. The next time you're really trying to figure this out, just take the word emotion and strike the letter E. Motions create emotions. Motions determine emotions.
I want to talk a little bit about this because John says, hey, to increase your influence, really, you've got to navigate for people. And when you think of the law of navigation, oftentimes as leaders, we go, okay, here we go. I'm going to tell you where we're going and how we're going to get there. That's not really what we're talking about here. Give us a little bit from your perspective, the importance of this on increasing your influence.
Well, and again, don't forget the context here. We're talking about influence and growing our ability to connect with others and help them get where they want to go. And one of my favorite laws of the 21 laws is the law of navigation. Now, in full disclosure, let me tell you why. John says of all the leaders that's ever worked for him that I exercise the law of navigation better than any. He doesn't say that about the other 20. I got one. So it becomes my favorite, okay, Chris? Now, I may not be any good at it. John just complimented because he couldn't find any other compliments. I'll take it. Yeah. But in this law of navigation, a leader many times feels like that their responsibility is to chart the course. That's the law of navigation. A leader is more effective the better they can chart the course. Okay, so we chart the course. When we're talking about influence, and John's talking about helping an influencer navigates for people, the worst thing we as a leader can do is to come in and navigate for someone else their destination. Yeah. Now, should we have an idea? Do leaders still see more and before even when they're developing influence with others? Yes, they do. Should I, as a leader, have a recommended course for you, Chris, to consider in your development? Absolutely. But once I give recommendations, it's my responsibility to shift from navigating your life to guiding you and letting you be the hero of your plan.
That's good. A
good friend of ours was at Exchange, an event that you run. We'll talk more about Exchange and if we have any spots for people along the way. By the way, let's put in the show notes, we'll put a link for Exchange because I just mentioned it, but I don't even know if there's spots, Chris. But anyway, at Exchange last year in Nashville, a friend of ours, Donald Miller, came and talked about, he has this incredible concept of the guide, the villain, the hero, and this other character in a story that is kind of this agitator, this villain is what he calls it. And all of us have in us the ability to do that at certain times. Well, when you're trying to influence people and you're navigating for them, as John's talking about here, you're simply a guide. You're not a mandate. You're not a dictator. You are a guide to help them get there. And again, I want to make that distinction because so many times we as leaders, we have this concept. We've got to know the way, go the way, show the way, and tell everybody else why they should go our way.
That's right.
And yet when we're trying to grow and influence people, we become overbearing and ineffective when we try to tell people what they should do with their life. One of mine and your very, very good friends, he deserves a shout out. He gave me an opportunity to work for John Maxwell 21 years ago, David Hoyt. And he says this all the time, and I love it when he calls me. He said, "Hey, Mark, I got to tell you, God loves you, and I have a wonderful plan for your life."
In that order.
In that order. And, well, it's not always that order. Sometimes it's, I have a wonderful plan for your life. By the way, God loves you to get there.
That's right.
As a leader, we can't do that when we're trying to grow influence with people.
Yeah.
We've got to love them and suggest and tweak and recommend, but yet just stay in that guide perspective, in that guide persona.
What I love about that is, John kind of wrapped up the session talking about, man, we have to see beyond the people as they are. And I think oftentimes as leaders, we can see and believe in people far greater than they can themselves. Mm-hmm. And we know where they can go. And so how do we help guide them and understand that and bring that out? Right. Like that's we talk about several of these principles, and John wrote an incredible book, by the way, around a lot of this, Leader's Greatest Return. And he talks about the fact that we can enlarge people and empower people and reproduce and all that kind of stuff. But in essence, man, we can see almost more than they can see for themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, we can't navigate, to your point, and as we think about it, leaders, we've got to help guide them, allow them to navigate to truly have the impact on them and where they're at. So, man, I absolutely love that. And that's a great perspective shift for us as leaders to remember when we think about that. All right, John goes on and he says, hey, to increase your influence, to be an influencer, man, you got to connect with people. Yeah. I love this because, John in the 5 levels of leadership talks about this permission level where, people give you the permission that they want to follow you. We use in the 5 levels of influence, he uses the word relationships, but it's not only that, it's also about connecting with them. Adversity connects, projects connect, ideas connect, questioning, all kinds of things connect. One of the things that I want to unpack a little bit here that just kind of grabbed both of us, and I'm going to give you an example that I thought of, and then I want you to share some things, real life, what you're dealing with in this in regards to leadership. John said so many times leaders think it's the responsibility of those that work, I think he used the word below them, on their team to come to them, to connect with them.
Yeah.
I know you said this years ago. You said, hey, leaders, you just need to understand that anybody inside our organization, I'm going to go by and I'm going to connect with them at any point in time. And I just want you to know I'm going to be talking to your people. And I'm going to be connecting with your people. And I want to know kind of where they're at and what's their agenda. What are they enjoying about it? And sure enough, to this day, you still do that. I'll see you popping in. I'm like, Mark's going into my team's office, like what's about to happen. But your whole purpose of that is, no. This team, it doesn't matter if they're on the job for 1 week or if they've been with us for 13 years, you're going to make an effort to go in and connect with them. And I love that you model that. That was the first thing that came to mind. When you think about what John said there, what comes to your mind?
Well, and let me say this on that point that you just made. It comes from Jack Welch's book, Management by Walking Around.
Yeah.
Too many people go out, especially in a company, organization as big as General Electric, and the CEO goes out into the field, and that's a big deal. Get out in the field, press flash, get out there. And some of you leaders, you do that. You press flash, you get out there. But you stay in the insulated office. You don't get out where the people are. You don't get out and sense their buy-in, sense their enthusiasm, hear their accomplishments, struggle with their struggle. Right. And so it really comes from great leaders like that, and watching John Maxwell in this idea of management by walking around. I think it's extremely important. When John talks about an influencer connects with people, I got to tell you, this is full disclosure. This is February. We're just coming off of January, brand new year. I don't believe a leader can connect with people until the leader connects with him or herself. Because we want to go out and we connect with people. Why? For an agenda. We want to see what they're doing. Even in your example with me walking around to your team, so many times I go and connect so they know I have their heart. It's for them. Yet so many times we are better leaders when we connect with people because we've already connected with ourselves.
That's good.
So January is always a connect with myself time. I have my year-end review. I reflect on what I did, what I didn't do well. There's a lot of what I didn't do well. So January is usually repair month. Let me repair what I didn't do well last year. Let me give you a couple of examples. I leave today at the point of recording, and I fly out to Salt Lake City before I have to be in Miami tomorrow night. You go, whoa, that's kind of a 2 different wardrobes in your bag. That's kind of a long trip. And I'm going out for one reason and one reason alone. I have a leader out there, one of our producers that runs one of our divisions, that she is carrying a huge load for our 2022 plan.
Yeah.
What I discovered at the end of December of 2021, and as I go into 2022, is that I gave very little time to such an important initiative last year. I gave very little time to the leader. I gave very little time to communicating the vision. I gave very little time to accountability. My first meeting in January, this is February, I get it, but as I'm looking today, the best thing I can do is to connect with this leader.
That's good.
Now, let me tell you what that means to me. It means not getting on a Zoom call. It means not waiting until next week when I see her in Florida. It means getting my rear end on a plane and going out there to let her know I realized last year I didn't connect enough, and this year's going to be different.
That's good.
I didn't want her coming to me. I didn't want to wait till we were in the same city. I wanted to make an additional effort to connect. And that is a big statement to go out there in this whirlwind trip in a crazy critical time that I am to connect. Another example. Last year, I was doing my best to detach myself from the leaders because I'm trying to empower. Not detach like I'm not here for you, but detach from asking what I think. Just let you do what you're doing. You're the example of this. So, beginning of January, I have these epiphanies. We're going to cast a vision. And recently, I cast a vision that impacted you inadvertently, but I didn't know so much directly. I cast the vision, and I'm watching. You. You were on Zoom in this meeting, but I'm going, you had to leave a little early, I didn't get that affirmation in your eyes. So what did I do? I connected with you by coming to you. Yep. And that was already on your schedule. You were going to connect with me and get clarity because we've talked a lot about find your voice. Yeah. But I went, wait, I got to connect. And I came back this morning and went, we're good. I got a couple of questions. I said, okay. At lunch, you know what I did after our leadership meeting? I asked you to lunch. Yeah. You know what you said? No.
Jake, by the way, Jake Decker had a more important meeting for me.
Yes. So you come down here and meet with Jake instead of meeting Jake, you're in trouble. And so you rejected me. I get that. But then that night, before I left, I said, hey, Chris.
Call me on the way home.
Call me on the way home. Yep. I wanted to get that in the middle. You know why? Because an influencer connects with people, and I realized that I had lost a little connection with you on that. Was it horrible? No, but left unattended, it becomes an abyss. Yeah, it becomes a canyon. Yeah. And so you and I connected that day. We went deeper, but that was an intentionality for the leader to say, if I'm going to gain influence with Godey or the other leaders in our organization, I'm going to have to be very intentional.
And what I saw this morning, going back to your first example, we were on a meeting together this morning when you said, hey, I'll see you in a little bit. I'm headed out this evening to see you. Just the smile of that individual looking at it and saying, man, I can't believe he's coming out here. So I absolutely love that because leaders, it's our responsibility to close that gap and make sure we do that.
Can I say one more thing? I started that whole little deal, and we got one more little thing we want to share before we run out of time. I started that by saying this. I don't believe a leader can connect effectively with others if he or she is not connected with themselves.
Correct.
End of December, 1st of January is a massive intentionality on connecting with myself. The best way I knew to do this, I shared it last week. It's on my desk again. The best way to do that is to develop the leader within you. Connect with yourself. Don't develop others at the expense of not developing yourself. I'm going to challenge you. This is the second week in a row because it's that important. We're at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to challenge you. How intentional are you in developing yourself? You want to connect with others? Connect with yourself. We did this last week. You guys, a lot of you responded. We've got a digital product with this book called Developing the Leader Within You 2.0, the digital product. 10 lessons with John. It's hours of John's teaching. We're giving our podcast listeners a 20% discount. You can go to the show notes. By the way, when you click that link, it'll ask you for a code. Put in the code podcast, and we'll get you a discount. But again, going back to that, how are you intentionally connecting with yourself so you can connect with others?
12 choices leaders make to fuel their influence. Talk about increasing their influence. We're going to give you some things that you make choices, maybe even on a daily basis, and you're not even aware of it, that will increase or fuel your influence. And we talk about that leadership is influence. We interchange the words all the time here at Maxwell Leadership. And so what we want to do is generate some thoughts, some discussion around how do you grow this? What does it look like with some of these simple terms?
Yeah.
And you created a chart,
Yeah.
which will be, you can download it in the Learner's Guide.
Yep.
And we're going to kind of go through this and banter them back and forth.
I think that'd be a good way to do it. And you use the word simple. It is a simple. These are not rocket science, but they are. It's so amazing to me when I get into discussions with people. Actually, we'll tell people. We've said it here many, many times. It said that people are watching you all the time, and people always agree. 100%, they agree. And then I'll say, "But what are they watching for?" Now, do you remember the answer to that? What are they watching for?
Where I'm going to lunch?
Yeah,
no. I think about how you're leading your actions, how you're reacting. Reaction, that's another.
Oh, that's huge.
Man, we could talk about that for a while as a leader. How you're interacting, what your behavior is. Really, when it comes down to, I tell a lot of people, we're really in the behavioral change business.
Yep.
Not only we start with ourselves first, continuing to work on our own behaviors, but then helping leaders and cultures develop, their leaders. It also goes back to the definition that we get from kind of Greg Cagle with the culture piece, which is how are you thinking, acting, and interacting
That's good, yeah.
as a leader? And so that's what they're watching for. That's it.
I love that. Although I do, when I ask that in large meetings, always someone says they're watching for you to mess up. Okay, no. There may be that odd individual that would like for you to mess up, but for the most part, people don't want you as their leader to mess up. They want you to succeed because when you succeed, they succeed. So I think they're watching you for your actions, your reactions, your interactions, and your behaviors. And why are they watching for this? What are they doing with that information?
Yeah, remember, in order to increase your influence with people, you don't get to determine what level of influence you have with them. They get to determine. So you don't walk into a room and say, I have level 4 influence with Perry Holly. That's not how it works. How it works is that Perry would say, hey, Chris has level 4 influence with me. Right. And so when you think about it that way, what they're watching for is really, as a leader, is how do we get from level 1 influence as a titled leader to them to level 2 where they're giving you permission? Well, they're not going to give you permission to lead them or influence them until they watch your behaviors before they watch your actions.
Yeah, so I'm trying to determine, am I going to let you lead me? Yeah. So these 12 things,
let's do it.
They're simple. Maybe we should do a little point counterpoint. Which I'm going to give you the easy side. You can take what I think helps your influence.
I did notice it was the easier side, so I appreciate that.
I give you the helps influence, and I'll take the could hurt your influence.
Okay.
So why don't you go first?
Yeah. The first thing we have here is what could actually help your influence is we have the word ask. And
versus tell.
Okay. Right. So ask for us would be, are you really curious? Increasing your influence. You've got to ask questions. Good leaders, right? Ask great questions. And you have to do that in order to be curious. When you're curious and you're asking people questions and you want to know their point of view, then it's going to increase your influence. It's going to help you.
Yeah. And then if I take the tell side of that is I'm going to tell people what to do. I'm kind of leaning on that level 1 influence again. I'm the smartest one in the room. Like I have all the answers. So I like influence building with ask says that you're involving me in the decision. Tell says it's all about me. And it becomes almost like a dictator. And it really causes people, we mentioned in a previous podcast about salute and stay mute, just do what you're told, which then reduces engagement. It's not a winning formula. Right. So I definitely want to be on the ask side.
Yeah, I love that. Second one we have for you is focus versus distracted.
Yes.
And for me, when I think about how you increase your influence, when we use the word focus, it's really about, do your people feel like when you're having a conversation with them or you're in a meeting with them, that this is the most important thing that you could be working on or talking about at that moment, no matter what it is? Or are you distracted like you talked about? And so in order to increase your influence, you need to be focused on the team, the individuals, the conversation, the meeting, the people. I'll never forget, I was visiting a client of ours, and this individual that was in this organization, I would have level 1 influence with him. He has level 1 influence with me. We don't really know each other that well. We know our titles in the different organizations. And I'll never forget, I walked into his office really for maybe the first or second time that we met. He was working on his laptop, and he saw me walk in. He shut his laptop, stood up, shook my hand, and then we had a 25-minute conversation like I was the most important thing. And I thought left there, I goes, man, like your influence has grown with me because of the way that you interacted and focused on.
Yeah, versus being distracted. If he'd have left his laptop open, his phone's on the desk, he's looking around, checking on text messages, reading stuff while he's appearing to try and talk to you. Are you influenced by that? Are you willing to give that person influence over you that you're going to willingly participate with them? I don't think so. It really distraction speaks that you don't value me. And so when you're focused and pay attention and you're present, you value people to do that.
It. Well, the third one, I'm going to let you go first here because I struggle with this a little bit. So I want you to talk about the negative side of this.
Yeah.
Okay?
So it was neat versus messy. This I probably could have used different words, but
I like it. We're keeping it simple.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if you walk in my office and I'm completely disorganized, it kind of leads into unprepared. I don't know where my things are. I'm searching for things. I'm disheveled, disarray. It could even carry over into my dress and how I appear to people that I'm not put together. It really breeds some concern with people that you don't have it all together.
Yeah.
Now, is this saying if you have a messy office, you can't be an effective leader? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying if you're trying to gain influence with people, I'm more influenced by people who are organized and put together. So are you a neat freak?
No, I'm not. And that's why I was like, I want to hear your side of the story first. But I think it's interesting about this, what I was thinking about is that we talk about increasing your influence. And so in this example that I'm going to give you, it's really about increasing your influence from level 2 to level 3. So to your point, let's say I'm working for a leader and he has level or she has level 2 influence with me. And I go into his or her office and it's a complete disaster. And I start thinking about, man, do we really know what our KPIs are? Do we really know where the next project is? Whatever. And I go, I don't know. Now, some people that might not bother. And so you just got to begin thinking about that. And so I do think also under the neat side that people do try to model leadership in certain ways and your people will follow at sometimes. And I think this is a great way to be able to do that. Number 4, we have talk versus yell.
I think this was obvious.
Yeah, this is right. Here's what I thought when I said this to increase your influence is that people care more about hearing your voice than it is what you're saying at times. Mm-hmm. And this really goes back to communication as a leadership competency that there's a deficit of this in any organization around the world. And so they do care about that. Now they may not necessarily care exactly what you're saying, but they want to hear the leader's voice. And the more they hear your voice, I think that'll increase your influence. Versus
yelling or raising your voice or losing your temper, having emotion around this. I'm thinking about what we talked earlier. What are people watching for? Your actions, that's obviously. How about your reactions? How do you handle bad news? How do you handle difficult information? And if you go into to anger or emotional spraying on people, your emotions and raising your voice and that sort of thing, it is an instant turnoff for most people when it comes to influencing me. I'm going to back away, pull back on that. I'm much more influenced by a consistent behavior of you're managed when it's good, you're managed when it's bad. You talk it's a advent of respect toward people. Is I don't yell at people.
Yeah,
that's disrespectful. And so it may seem like a small one, but it's probably more obvious than some of the others. But and
I think in the heat of the moment, and when you're backs up against the wall, some leaders don't understand that.
Good.
And I would encourage you to dig into that a little bit. Well, the 5th one that we're going to bring to you today is you help your influence by what we call kind of measured or measuring versus maybe being rushed or reactive in a way. And I'll let you speak to that in just a minute. For me, when I think about the word measured or measuring, it comes with thought. The leader has thought through. It's a measured approach. The other thing I took it was also measuring results or measuring what the team is doing or where you're going or what you're leading. And what you measure gets done. And everybody wants to be a part of a winning team, right? Versus a losing team. And so the only way to really know if you're winning versus losing and how to correct and what not to correct is to measure what you're doing.
And I think what I was going with measured versus rushed is that are you and you said it was thoughtful. Are you more precise? Are you rushed? Are you just going from thing to thing to thing? Is it too much for people to keep up? You don't have a measured approach to things, so you're making me feel almost disheveled again and out of sorts, and you're in such a hurry with things that you don't. John would say, stop and walk among the crowd, be among the people. That you're always rush to do things that it's problematic.
I love it. All right, the next one we're going to talk about, number 6 on the chart, is on time versus late. For me, this is really about respecting other people. And I need to get better at this. I think even the way we calendar things could help you become more on time, just so that you're showing respect and engagement level with other team members.
Yeah, and that, I think it speaks for itself that if you're late, you're disrespecting, you're not being there. Next one says margin versus maxed out.
Yeah.
Why are we laughing? Because this is our life. This is actually something we battle with right now.
We do. And several, if you haven't listened to an episode we did several weeks ago around the new kind of hot buzz around quiet quitting, I would encourage you to do that. We talked a little bit about this, and is that we've got to do a better job as leaders of modeling margin in our own life, and then also talking about and encouraging your team to have margin in their life. And when you do that, I think it increases your influence.
Yeah, when you're maxed out, you're just sending a bad message. People don't. I don't even want to approach my leader because I don't want to add something else. They seem like they're stressed out. They're going to fall apart. They're over the top. They're consumed completely. Yeah, I'll just keep it to myself.
Yeah.
Now my level of engagement.
Number 8 is respond versus react. And this, for me, when you talk about, sometimes when people will engage you, voicemail, text, email, this is where I went with this personally, and I don't respond, which happens, then that is nothing favorable with your influence. But when you do respond in a way that it's consistent and it increases your influence. I actually, just this morning, before we recorded this episode, there was an email where a team member of mine sent that added value to me in some research that I was doing. And I had not responded to it. Didn't even, acknowledge it, but I was grateful for it. And I thought, man, I need to respond. And so I just responded and said, thank you. This helped me a ton. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
But the fact that and think about what that feels like for us when, we add value to people, we're doing something, we get no response. We're just like,
yep.
Yeah.
And I think about this also from a different approach on that, about react. Again, it's, I call it mind the gap between what happened, what someone said. If I go quickly, as there's no gap, then I have a reaction that's usually not that good.
Yeah.
But if I can pause for a moment and have a gap there, I can respond in a more thoughtful way. But I actually like where you took it too, is that there's really a lot of influence building in being responsive to people. That's maybe you can add that to the list.
Yeah.
The next one, number 9, says consistent versus erratic. Boy, that's a big one. It kind of goes back to some of the ones we talked about. It kind of relates back to, are you, when you're triggered, when things go south, when there's tension in the air, a challenge, are you all over the place, or does your emotion and your behavior have a consistency to it?
Yeah, and I think this, for me, when you increase your influence through consistency, it comes down to the word approachable. And I think when you are approachable, no matter what is going on around you, that increases your influence.
I agree.
Number 10, the difference here is listener versus talker. And for me, our team, our people want to be heard, period. Now, we're not saying hear them. We're saying listen to them. I say that because I maybe have that being told to me at home sometimes. And so I think the better listener, we all can become better listeners. And I think the better listener we become, the more we'll increase our influence.
Yeah, you talk too much. You don't trust people that talk all the time.
Too many words.
Again, it goes back to being measured about what are you talking? Are you listening? Are you listening more than you talk? People, they're influenced by people that ask good questions and then listen to the answers. You don't have to be always talking over people to do that.
Or whatever they're talking about, you got a better story and you're one-upping
my
them
story,
all that stuff.
Don't do that. Number 11, I threw this in because can you have a sense of humor, or are you always serious? Humor versus serious.
I've worked for a lot of leaders, and I've had some serious, right? But they had great influence with me. But there's just a different level of influence and connection for me personally. Maybe not everybody listening, to where when there's humor, and I just think it drives realness, it drives engagement. and then in turn increases your influence.
And I love it because we do laugh a lot here. We take the work seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously, and we take shots at each other and we laugh at each other. Even here in the studio today, we've laughed pretty hard with.
We're
Jake.
an hour and a half late because Jake kept throwing daggers at us.
Yes,
but we laughed.
No, we laughed. We had a good time. All right, number 12. One of my favorites is: are you teachable or are you the know-it-all? And I just find that it's one of my favorite words in leadership is that are you showing yourself teachable, or do you the leader that comes in and you have all the answers, you never ask any questions, you tell people all the things, and it just doesn't bode well for influence when you have all the answers.
As a leader, I never forget this illustration, and I'm not sure who I heard it from first, where you want to be that leader, that individual, to where when you walk in a room and then you leave the room feels smarter than it did maybe before you had that conversation. What you don't want in a leader, or you don't want to represent yourself and won't increase your influence, is if you walk into a room and they go, well, man, he obviously thinks he was the smartest person in the room. Remember, I said thinks because I guarantee you were not.
You never are.
But that just has that aura when it's not good when you walk in as if you know it all and you're the subject matter expert. You may be. But man, you do not need to do that. You need to go in there with a teachable heart. And I think if you do that, it increases your influence. I want to go into, John talks about an influencer nurtures people. Now, when we hear the word nurturing, we don't necessarily think of a leader right away, do we? Right? Yeah. This is, we use the word soft, and that may come across to you as, I don't want to be a nurturing leader. It's not easy, by the way. It may be soft, but it is not easy. And John goes on to say, man, it does mean a commitment to your people. It does mean loving your people. And I will tell you this, that as long as you and I have worked together and worked with John, there is no doubt that he nurtures as a leader to those that are on his team and in his influence. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective as a leader, the importance of that. Again, I'm air hashtagging right here, nurturing of people.
You got it. First of all, let me say this to all you podcast listeners. Yeah. You need to jump on YouTube and kind of check out the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. YouTube search it, and you'll find us. You've got to see how nurturing it feels to see Chris Godey use air in a
pink shirt, but it's February.
It's
right?
February.
So we're
Happy Valentine's Day to you, Chris.
Right.
So this has been more pronounced to me in John Maxwell's leadership over the last 2 or 3 years than at any other time. I wouldn't have started 21 years ago and said, man, that John Maxwell, he's a nurturing leader.
Right.
Now, he's always been a valuing people, loves everybody. Everybody feels welcome. You don't work for me, you work with me. He says nurturing things in his sleep. I mean, he's just great at it. But it has really become obvious to me, Chris, over the last 3 years when he first found his word for the year to be Father. And there is this pride. John wrote me a card over the holidays. He in his year-end review, he kind of writes cards based on impact moments that he had. He then pulls out a note card right in the impact moment and writes a thank you note. It's a brilliant idea. I'm going to teach on it in a podcast because I'm going to steal it because it's a great idea. I got one of those, and I just opened it this weekend. Been traveling, just opened my mail, and had this thing from John, and he said, my most proud thing I've done this year is to watch you do your thing. He said, of all the things that we've accomplished, and 2021 was a great year for all of us, Chris, including you and your team. He said, of all the things I'm proud of all the things that just made me swell with pride and thanksgiving, it was watching you lead to the next level. Now, I don't believe those were just nice words. I think that was the nurturing father side of John Maxwell. This was real pronounced to me just an hour before walking in the studio. John and I are doing a consulting arrangement with a group from Mexico, Zifra, powerful leaders. These young people are fired up, and they're asking these questions of John and I. And John's going to throw one or two of them my way, and so I'm ready, and I go gangbusters with my answers. I mean, I'm just like this. My YouTube family, I'm just like this. I mean, I'm fired up, ready to go. And John just kind of pauses, and there's this love and this thing, and you're going, Number one, his answers are always good, but number one, you don't even have to answer correctly. I just feel a warm embrace right now.
Yeah.
One was asking, how do I stop failing and disappointing people around me? And I've got 3 reasons and why passion is going to do. And John just slows down, and it's less about his words than it is about his demeanor. And leaders, if I could help you,
so good.
and I could help me,
good.
if I could help me right here, if you will nurture with your persona, with your attitude, with your presentation, it'll go further and last longer than your wise, passionate words. And I'm still learning that. I'm not a nurturing leader. I have this hard charge. If I can fire you up, we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And John just goes, man, if I can make you believe in yourself,
Yeah.
you're going to get it done.
Yeah, and when you were just talking about that, I was like, man, I know that I tied that to a comment he made. And even in your show notes here, he says nurturing people does mean lifting people to a higher level.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of complexity that comes to lifting your people to a higher level. But even in just that illustration of him answering that question by slowing down and understanding, hey, you're not always going to get approval from people. You're not going to make them happy and then just talk through that from a demeanor. You lift people up.
Yeah, and let me say this, in leadership, and I'm not talking to you as a mom over your family or a dad working through a troubled teen. I'm talking about in leadership, and that has elements of leadership. There's a big difference in nurturing and enabling.
Yes.
And many leaders feel like if I nurture, then I am enabling you or empowering you to less than. Yeah. And that's not true. Back to your quote of John. Nurturing is continuing to lift them to a higher level, but it's not kicking them in the butt to do it. It's lifting them from the heart
Totally
to do
agree.
it.
Hey, one thing I thought about here as well, when John talks about that nurturing does mean loving people, one of the things that you and I are extremely excited about is our League of Extraordinary Leaders.
Yeah.
And Joel Manby, a powerful executive in the corporate world, has actually partnered with us and just done a off of his book, a digital content called Love Works. And we went back and forth and we said, do we include that word in the title? And we said, man, absolutely we have to, because that's just part of leading people. And so it's he puts together 7 principles of better way to lead and to love your people.
Take me to this whole concept. Before you can intentionally grow, you've got to have this plan. You've got to have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
So how do you begin to put into practice? Give me some practical things of how a leader can get into a practice of developing this growth mindset.
Oh, growth mindset is one of my favorite topics in positive
I've heard you
psychology.
speak on it, and she's really good.
So there's quite a few researchers involved, but one of the main ones is Dr. Carol Dweck. She wrote a book called Mindset. It was really a life-changing thought process for me. So basically, many of us grow up praised for being smart or being talented, or even as adults, we thrive on that, right? And it's about your natural gifts, and we praise people for that. But what Dr. Dweck and other researchers discovered is that that's not the most important thing. Effort is actually more important. We're actually capable of doing a lot more than we realize, but we often say, well, I don't have that gift. I don't have that talent. I'm not that smart at whatever it is, right? We can actually learn and grow. So those who have a fixed mindset tend to believe that their talents, their gifts are set. And the reason that's a problem is because when they get to a challenge they can't figure out, or they face a problem they haven't come up with a solution for, they think it's a condemnation on their intelligence or their talent. And so oftentimes you might find yourself shrinking away from a challenge because you're afraid it's going to show people, I'm not as great as you think I am.
Yeah.
What she discovered, she actually discovered this working with gifted and talented students, is that a growth mindset looks at a problem that it can't figure out and says, oh, there's something more for me to learn. They're not actually intimidated by the challenge they can't figure out. They're actually inspired by it. They actually realize, oh, well, I was smart enough to do all this other stuff. If I work a little harder, if I learn, if I ask around, maybe I'm going to get smarter. Maybe I could be more talented. And so she called this a growth mindset. And it really applies in our leadership abilities. I had to apply this because I didn't use the word leader.
Yeah.
And I was leading, and I didn't consider myself a leader. It applies in relationships. Maybe you didn't grow up with great relationship role models. And so you're like, I'm just not good at this. Well, what if you could get better at it? It could be the same in finances or health. So developing a growth mindset is essential. Otherwise, we back down from opportunities that are in front of us because we're just afraid it means something that it doesn't actually mean.
Well, it reminds me, I had on this podcast several years ago, Carly Fiorina, a former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, done some incredible things. And, John Maxwell, if you listening to the podcast, John defines leadership as influence, nothing more, nothing less. Carly was on this podcast and she said, Mark, leadership is really problem solving, nothing more, nothing less. And I went, ooh, don't tell John Maxwell that. He's always thought it was influence. But what she was really saying is it's a mindset. That leaders don't see problems as a reason to vacate leadership. They see it as an opportunity to step into leadership.
That's the point. That's why we need leaders.
That is exactly why we need leaders. This idea that there is a degree of uncertainty to leadership. It is a fact of life. Our ability to change our mindset, whether it's growth, whether it's leadership, comes in our ability to change the mindset. And wouldn't you agree, most of the time, we can't unlock our mindset without help.
We have to be open. To be able to grow is to say, and especially if you were praised in certain areas and your identity is set with those areas, to be able to say, yeah, there are some levels I haven't reached, but do I want to achieve my potential? Do I want to learn more? Is it okay for me to not know the answer or not be great at this yet? I mean, that's powerful. So on a practical level, I would say, where is that area that you always shy away from? Maybe you're in marketing and you're like, I don't understand the accounting. I'm just not good at that. Okay, but would you be willing to learn something in that area? That doesn't mean you need to become an accountant, but if you understand accounting, you're going to be much better at marketing. You're actually going to expand the number of opportunities you have because you're understanding all the needs of the company in a bigger way. And so just being able to say, yeah, I could learn from here. The growth mindset says where I am today is a starting point.
Wow.
This isn't the end. I haven't, reached this lid that I can't get above. I get to raise the lid and grow. And that in itself is powerful. To me, that's the exciting part of personal growth, that you're willing to keep growing. And that it's not any kind of condemnation on who you are when you don't know answers.
So then you get this epiphany, perhaps for some, I need to grow. I need to unlock myself. There's a blind spot that I have. How important is it from your perspective, and she's a life coach, so I understand that. How important is it your perspective, that follow through and that companionship or that partnership as you begin to unlock these things that's holding you back from growth?
Yes. So I think this is something I discovered for myself. So I love any kind of positive psychology assessment, like figure out who I am. I've got, I created one around happiness triggers, the things that just kind of trigger your happiness naturally. Well, I love doing the ones on strength. And there's a character strength survey that's called the VIA, but there's also the Strengths Finder, which is Gallup. And there's a strength on there that I envied, which is terrible.
You had strength envy.
Yes, I did. And my husband had it in his top 5. And I don't know where it was for
That's
me.
even worse. You envy it, and then it's your significant other.
And I was like, it was called activator. Activators, when they have, there's an opportunity, they go. Like, I'm an overthinker. Anyone else in here overanalyze? You have an idea, it takes you like 5 years to move forward with it, right? I analyze it, I plan it, I write the plan, I write the vision. I'm a visionary, but activate. I was like, I want activator. But those activators, they just run into stuff. Like, you need a plan. This was difficult for me. Well, I actually retook the Strengths Finder, and activator was in my top 5.
Come on.
And this is how I did it. I'm also a learner. I love learning. And I began to tie learning to action.
Wow.
In other words, rather than feeling like I had to be perfect and have the whole plan figured out, I realized that action is how you learn. So I would just say to myself, what action could I do? What could I learn? What action could I take that would teach me something that gets me closer to the goal? And so that's a growth mindset. That you say, I'm taking a step forward. The step doesn't have to be perfect. This might not work, but I'm still gonna learn something from it. And so that freed me because I had not given myself permission to take action unless I had all the answers first. But when I just made that simple mental shift, because I love learning, I love growing, and I said, well, you grow by taking action. And the thing was, I always teach that with coaching. In between coaching sessions, you take action. And then you come to the next session and you go, what happened? What did you learn? If nothing happened, there's still something to learn. If you procrastinated, let's dive into that. So I realized I knew that on a philosophical and a professional level, but applying it to myself actually helped me to activate my activator.
That's awesome.
It helped me to take action more often.
That is so encouraging. So if anybody's got strength envies, she knows how to help you get past that. So just real quick, did you take your test to your husband and say, ha, ha, ha? I mean, did we get, I'm just kidding.
I didn't, but he was so proud of me. I was like,
Yeah.
You will not believe this. Like, I wanted activator. And, your natural strengths generally, the ones that are just innate, they're going to stay pretty high for you. But you can be intentional about saying, I want more of this in my life. Like on the other strengths assessment, I wanted more humor and playfulness. That's Jeff's number one, by the way. So if you don't have it, you can marry it. Right?
There you go.
Have your date take a
Marry
strengths
the party.
assessment. I'm looking for.
I want a party.
But I did the same with that. I was like, I want more humor and playfulness. And so you can take strengths that you want and be intentional about incorporating those more, because strengths really are just values in action. It's what we set in motion because we value it.
Hey, welcome back. I hope as you heard John talk about this today, I hope you began to see yourself like Tracy and I see you. I hope you started feeling that winner's mindset, that ability to believe better things for 2023. I've heard it said often. I don't even know who to give the quote to, but I love this quote. It says, your leadership will only be as good as your mindset. And Tracy, I've got a chance to spend a lot of time. We've traveled with John and our team around the world. And truly, I watch you deliver every time I meet you, this winner's mindset. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm so glad you're co-hosting with me today. And boy, I appreciate these 3 points that John gave us today.
I do too. Thank you for that compliment. I don't know all the time if I feel like a winner, but I definitely try to have a winner's mindset. And this lesson definitely helps us all to have a winner's mindset. And so I just kind of want to dive right in, Mark, if you don't mind. First of all, I just want to say, I wish I was in the room with you.
No.
Sending you a hug.
Hey, virtual hug for those of you watching YouTube. And by the way, you all want to go over and join us on YouTube. But most of the time, Tracy recently has been flying all the way from Denver to be in the studio with me. And I miss you today. But hey, I'm excited of what you get to do there with your family and what you're getting to do with your community. So
That's right.
Virtual hug works this time. I'll see you in studio next time, though.
Next time, that's for sure. So, okay. So he starts out saying that it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And I think that's worth pausing on just for a moment, because that's a big statement. And so I'm curious for you, did you always have a growth mindset, or was there a time where you thought in your life, this is kind of a two-part question, was there always a time where you thought, or was there ever a time where you thought you felt like you knew it all and you had this aha moment that you knew just this tiny fraction of what there was to know? And then second part would be, how would a leader move from that, oh, I've got this down mentality to, wow, there is so much to learn? Because I think in that little moment where you realize it, that you feel like you're at the top of the mountain and then you realize it's just this little crag and the mountain is still, there's still so much to climb. What is that mindset shift to, as a winner with a winner mentality, to like, wow, there is still so much more to learn?
So let me start with the second question, because I think the second question leads to, or the second answer that I have will lead to the first answer that I have.
Okay, great.
And so I will tell you, I don't know how people learn that they don't know it all until they join the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
I know for me, I've always felt this, to your question, I've always felt this passion to grow. I've always felt this passion to lead. I didn't call it leadership as a 5 and 6 year old little boy, but it eventually made sense that leadership is what I wanted to do with my life. I felt like I've always felt I got a great gift from my parents, that I was pretty decent with relationships. But I'll tell you, in both of those areas that I've always had a passion to grow in, relationship and leadership development, it's the school of hard knocks that made me realize I didn't know it all.
Yeah.
And it really came, the hard knocks, the life's difficult circumstances that I went through, both relationally and then at another time leadership, was always when I was feeling pretty good about myself. I mean, I was doing good. In fact, just ask me, I was doing really good. And then everything came to a screeching halt. And I'm thinking now of a relationship failure and a relationship mess up that I had, that I just felt like I had it all together, only to discover I didn't know anything compared to what I needed to know. And I went through a long process of learning things relationally that I still draw from that moment, Tracy, that John's talking about here. It's what you learn after you know it all that matters. I still to this day pull from that moment that I learned so much after I thought I knew it all. Certainly that's true in leadership too, Tracy, in that I've had 10 promotions in Maxwell Leadership. 10 promotions, 10 opportunities to grow, 10 opportunities to lead differently, 10 opportunities to hopefully undo what I'd messed up in the previous opportunity. Sometimes I wonder if they promoted me to see if I could do something a little better than I did the last time rather than I had earned it. because these radical changes, these radical promotions always demonstrate to me what I thought I knew so much in the previous assignment. I only find out that I have so much to learn in the new assignment. I believe my attractiveness perhaps to be promoted relied on my hunger to learn. Pat Lencioni says it like this: you got to be hungry, humble, and smart to be an ideal team player. And I think that hunger comes when you realize that you didn't know it all. I believe that's where true humility and true hunger comes from. I remember John says this. He says, boy, I know less now than what I knew at 2025, but what I do know, I'm more certain on. And I would tell you, Tracy, my biggest takeaway from this point with John, I've become more certain these days. We started out this whole lesson saying January is already done and time's flying. I'm going to tell you this: the older I get, the more time flies, the more I realize how little I do know, which puts a posture of hunger, learning, and an appetite to be coached more than I've ever been in my life. I desire to be coached by things like podcasts, mentoring relationships, conversations like you and I are having right now, Tracy.
I love, and I want to highlight there that what John has said for so long, based on what you just said, failure is a part of success. Failure is not the opposite of success. And you learned those lessons from a failure when you extracted the lesson and kept going on. And before I move to point number 2, I just want to highlight when John said leadership is developed, not discovered. I want to encourage all of our podcast listeners. That means everyone can be a leader. That doesn't mean there is the needle in the haystack leader out there that we just have to find them. There's only one born every 10 years. It's every person can be a leader developed. We don't have to wait to discover them. So I think that's a point worth mentioning here to encourage all of you who are listening. If you feel like, well, I'm not really a leader, you can absolutely be a leader developed as long as you continue to keep learning.
Hey, Simon, I want to go to you first for the next question. It's from Dominic from St. Louis. And by the way, if you're watching, go to the chat box, list a question. We want to get your question in front of Simon and John Maxwell. This question from Dominic, St. Louis says, what is the best way for a leader to break out of a short-term mindset and embrace a mindset better suited for the infinite game?
Well, the mindset is the infinite mindset. So the way to break out of it is to actually sit down and say, what game am I in? The being in the infinite game is not the absence of finite games. It's the context within which the finite games exist. And we use the wrong metaphors and analogies to describe our lives, our businesses. And so most of the metaphors that we use reinforce the finite mindset. We use sports analogies all the time. We use war analogies all the time. This is a campaign. We're launching this, it's fourth and goal, and we have to, this is how we talk to our teams about making, the end of the year numbers or something. And the reality is the analogies are all wrong because these are games that have no finish lines. These are infinite games. And so we have to change our mentality of how it's playing. And I like to think of it more like lifestyle. So for example, like being healthy. You can absolutely have finite goals. I want to lose X amount of weight by X date. It's a finite number. I mean, it's an arbitrary number and an arbitrary date, just like we said, arbitrary financial goals for arbitrary dates. Same thing, right? Sales goals, all of it's all arbitrary, right? And we like numbers. Metrics are really important. It helps people feel like they're making progress. You could never run a marathon without mile markers because it's unnerving. And we have to remember metrics are there to help us understand speed and distance, but they don't indicate the end of the game. It's speed and distance. And so it's wonderful. And we weigh ourselves every day and we're exercising, we're eating right, and we can see the weight come off. And if we hit our goal, we feel excited. And here's the worst part. You have to keep exercising and eating healthy for the rest of your life because the game does not end. Congratulations, you hit your goal. Now you have to keep going and going and going. It's a different mind frame, different mindset. Also, what happens if you miss your goal? You know what happens if you miss your goal? Nothing. Nothing happens if you miss your goal. It was arbitrary. But if you've been eating healthy and exercising, the odds are you'll hit that goal in a month or so. You're fine. In fact, you're probably way healthier now than when you started because the metrics were there. The finite game is there to help you make progress in the infinite game. That's the role of the finite game. That's the role of many of those finite games. The infinite game is the context within which those finite games exist. But if we don't have vision, if we don't have a cause, if we don't have a place that we're trying to go to, then the only thing we have are the finite things. The only thing we have are those finite metrics. And that's why we become so obsessed with them, because that's all we've got.
Wow.
That's all we've got. And so you want to have that distant view of a more idealized state of the world, which is different than a BHAG, different than a big, hairy, audacious goal. This is not achievable in 25 years. This is not achievable in your lifetime. All men are created equal. 240 years, still not there, right? But all of the milestones that we pass, we're trying to get there, and all of them are imperfect. But you can see a nation struggling to get somewhere. It's the same at a micro level. To have a vision of service, to have a vision of a world, the way John talks about his business, the way John talks about his work, and all of the things he's doing are the micro games, the finite games that help him measure progress towards this grander thing. And by the way, that is what gives our lives and our work meaning. That the finite metrics actually are adding up towards something bigger.
Oh, that's good stuff. Can I pitch for? Everybody? If you're on, you've got to get Simon's book, The Infinite Game. I'm telling you, you got to get it. and the reason you have to get it is I've read every one of your books, Simon. Okay.
Thank you, John.
I truly think this is, to me, now every book speaks to you based on where you are. So when somebody says it's a great book, it became great because that what was said in that book is coming right up to where I am personally. The Infinite Game was incredible because when I started off, I was goal oriented. And so I laid out my goals. In fact, my first personal growth kit was goals and how to set goals. And so I did. And it was kind of like, how long will it take? How long will it take? How long will it take? And one day in my personal growth, because of the changes happening in me, I went from how long will it take to how far can I go? And that was my first introduction to the Infinite Game. All of a sudden, I realized, oh my. And then I began to understand there really is no finish line. That the metrics are finishing are not finishing lines. They're indicators of how far you've gone. But if you have a finish line, if you play a finite game and that's all you have, you don't have the bigger infinite game. The problem is when you cross the finish line, as you know, Simon, you're finished. I mean, it's over. And how many times do we see people? They've already died. They just haven't made it official. You know what I'm talking about? I mean,
You see this in companies, right? We want to be the biggest. We want to be number one. So what happens if you achieve that? Do you shut the doors? You've accomplished your goal. Shut the doors. The game is over.
That's exactly right.
So true.
Hey, John, I want to hear.
You want to get that book. Make sure they get the book, Mark.
Thank you, John.
They want to get it.
How can you tell if you have a servant mindset? And I am talking to those young leaders in our audience, but I'm also talking to those of us who are a little bit more seasoned. And the question that he asked is, how can you tell if you have a servant mindset? By the way you react when you're treated like one. So when I was younger, when I was treated like a servant, did I have this attitude of like, hey, I'm trying to rise in the ranks. Why are you treating me like I'm, beginning? And then maybe as an older leader, more seasoned leader, I'll use that term, I might have the attitude of, hey, I've been at this a while. Don't you know who I am? That might be the temptation, the weed of the player to come up and say, hey, don't you see what I've done? Posturing a little bit. And so I really love that he used that as a check, which this whole lesson is a check in your spirit, inside the inner man, the inner woman of am I leaning more towards selfish or servant? And how did that strike you? Because that's how it hit me. And I know it hits every person differently, but to me, it's a checkpoint of like, how do I respond? And so I'm sure a bunch of different moments flood your brain of when you were treated as a servant, how did you rise, or how did you kind of not do so well?
You mentioned here in studio, when I heard that statement, you have a servant mindset by the way you react when you're treated like one. And you heard me in studio, and I went, whoa. Now I heard John do this lesson live. Maybe John said that dozens of times in his life. I don't know. I never heard it like I did today. Yeah. Maybe I listened to it before, but I never heard it like I did today. And maybe it's because of some situations that flooded my mind right when he said that. But Tracy, that statement is what made me come out of the lesson from John and tell all of you viewers and all you listeners and go, I think I want to cause a break and just say, hey, you're on your own today. Tracy, you're not doing a deep dive. I'm going in the back room of the studio and I'm going to go figure this out. Because let me attempt to try to unfiltered, Tracy, tell you how I took that. Number one, I think just face value. You're a servant if you have a servant mindset if people treat you like a servant and you do not take offense to that. Okay, that's really good. But I can tell you a time when I first started with John 22 years ago now. I started with this team, and I was an entry level. I was a 30-year-old entry level. The four leaders ahead of me, above me, between me and John Maxwell, the owner, were all younger than I. I had led bigger budgets than most of them. Yet I felt like I deserved to be treated like a servant at that stage in my life. Many of you know my story. I was rejected at that point. I was relationally bankrupt. I was financially bankrupt. I was emotionally bankrupt. I felt like I should be a servant. I was kind of like the prodigal son. Just let me come be a servant and I'll be thankful to eat your servant's meal. I saw myself as a servant, and so I didn't mind people treating me as a servant. But that's not what's going on here. Now I'm the big cheese, whatever that means. When the real test of being a player comes in is not when you see yourself as servant, therefore you let others see you as servant. It's when you see yourself as the leader and the responsible one, and you still let people treat you as a servant. And that, Tracy, that struck me because I never want to lose that 30-year-old mindset that I came into John's organization, and that is team. Anybody, direct report, not direct report, direct supervisor, or somebody that I'm supervising. I will do whatever it takes to serve you and empower you to be successful. As a leader, I never want accelerated position or accelerated accomplishment to cause me to lose my desire to be a servant. And the best way to know that is when someone doesn't respect me, my decision, or my position. What do? I'm convicted.
Yeah. Oh, and it even spurs on like, how can I serve, even like next level my servanthood? Like, not just how do I act when people treat me as a servant, but can I view myself, do I still view myself as a servant? Like, if as the big cheese or the top dog of your business or of your organization. And I'm talking to you leaders out there who have a few or many people who serve under you in your team. You know, do you show up and expect your coffee to be at your desk or whatever? Or do you show up and do you bring your team coffee? Do you show up and expect things to be there, or do you serve them and bring them things in the traditional area where they would think they would be serving you in that area? And so loving those, I love the way John leads the way in that. I love the way you lead the way in that, Mark, where you do show up and you serve people, and that just shows us that's okay. And I love that John says this when he says, and don't lose this, friends, he said, you know, I learned in my 40s. And so that just tells us, you know, John is looking back on a lifetime of leadership and helping us chart our way through. But he's telling us something that he learned at 40.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we think John knew this in his 20s because John is John. But he's a human too. And there was a player. I love when he makes himself so human and says, there's a player inside me too. And I realized in my 40s, I needed to do this, that, and the other thing.
So I'm glad you brought John up. This is going to be, again, traveling around the world and getting to meet podcast listeners. One of the things you guys love is kind of the behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to give you really behind the scenes. In fact, many of you are already, you don't even know what I'm getting ready to say. You're already going TMI, 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 too much information, too much information. So here we go. But one of the things I love about John, this is already formulating, is very funny in my mind. Many times, because we're rushing from plane to plane or this, that, and the other, half the time we're anticipating getting to go to the restroom way before we get to go to the restroom. So what I'm saying is John and I are not like teenage girls, but oftentimes we have to go to the restroom about the same time because we've been holding, wait, we got to run, we got to airport. And so what I love about John, again, TMI, is we're going to the restroom.
I love this story already.
And we finish up our business, and then we come out, and many times he's done before me or whatever, he's sitting there holding the paper towels that I'm going to need once I wash my hands so that I don't have to pull them out. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, he's doing that, Mark, to remind you need to wash your hands. Some of you are going, this is way too awkward. You're talking about bathroom time with John. Get above all of that, you crazy people, and just catch this. John Maxwell, Mr. Busy, crazy, got a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. He's already done his business. He's already washed his hands. He's already dried his hands. And he's sitting there holding my paper towels to give me so that I can dry my hands once I wash the hands. He doesn't need to do that. He doesn't have to do that. Right. Why he does things like that and many other things is to never lose the sight that a player is a servant, not selfish. And I'm glad you brought that up. I've never shared that story before. So those of you that love the behind the scenes, that one was for you. But for those of you that are really capturing this servant mindset, I want you to get the mental image to some extent of John Maxwell sitting there finished, holding paper towels for another human being to dry their hands and move on. It's a great picture of a servant leader. I wrote a statement at the top of my notes as John was talking. There's nothing profound here, but there is something significant here in this statement. Teams that can't function without the leader is limited in its effectiveness. Now, again, that's not profound. We all could have wrote that as we just were listening and absorbing what John was saying. But here is the profound thought in that for me. Not the statement, but the reality. And the reality is, as a leader, I love to be wanted and needed, and I want my voice to matter. But more than, and I want it done faster, which is why some of the times I don't move to a we mindset. I can just get it done faster, Becky. And that's not a statement of egotism. It's a statement of reality. However, it will only be faster for so long because then I become weighted down because everything relies on me.
Right.
It will only be effective for so long because I will cease to see the horizon because I'm watching the path. And as a leader,
we've got to awaken ourselves from this me to we. Yes, if you're egocentric, get out of it. You're wearing everybody else around you. We know you're okay, but you're not as good as you think you are, okay? Now we got ego out of the way. That's not always the reason that I feel restricted from moving from a me to a we standpoint. I go longer and harder on a me concept to get things done quicker, to get them done like I want them to get them done effectively. The short-sightedness of that, however, is the reality of that statement. The team cannot be as effective as it should be until we move to a we mindset.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. Therefore, the thing that's got to awaken us leaders that are challenged with distributing responsibility or distributing empowerment has got to be the reality that we cannot be as effective if we don't learn how to do this we thing better.
Yeah. And I think that also comes back to a level of awareness of knowing and being honest with yourself of what your strengths and weaknesses are. I remember my dad, who's had a lot of success in the business world, when I was a teenager, coming home just frustrated from some of his board that he was around, and him just saying, look, the smartest business people I know are the ones that recognize what they can and they can't do. And they're smart enough to put people around them that are better than they are at certain things that they just are not naturally inclined to be good at. And that's always stayed with me. And it's interesting how John breaks it up in believers, achievers, conceivers, and relievers. So here's a trick question, Mark. Which one are you?
Ooh, achiever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. So I didn't know you were going to ask that. We didn't script that at all. But I want to be a believer, and I think I do okay with that. I conceive things pretty well, and then obviously I go over to a reliever. I've relieved John of a lot of responsibilities over the last 12 years as CEO. But that achiever thing, man, I want to get it done. Now, here's the beautiful thing of that. Because I'm an achiever, when something needs to get done, it's a limiter to go into we. Because put me in, I'll get it done. Well, putting yourself in as the leader all the time stymies the growth of people around you, limits the creativity of people that really can do it better than us. Don't tell anybody I said that, but they can do it better than us. And then finally, it ceases to expand our bandwidth to have time to do what only we as the senior leaders can do.
Yeah.
But it's achiever.
It is. But at the same time, I can also see pieces of all of that in you as well. And I think that really is that when he talks about the 360-degree leader, I think we all have that strength that probably stands out. But I've seen at times, and everyone has, of being able to kind of be well-rounded in all of those things. It's interesting how I don't think those are, I wouldn't say reliever is where I would want to be.
Yeah.
It's not my passion. And so it's not what fuels me. But again, out of necessity, it can be a strength when it has to be.
Well, and watching you and the effectiveness of you and our team is not only believer. I think you're strong in the believer standpoint. You believe there's a way. You believe you'll figure it out. And you have the ability to instill that into the others of the team. So then therefore, when you're really focused on a task, because you've instilled belief in your team, they can begin reproducing belief that the project's going to work. I was struck in this lesson of John moving from me to we. Because most of you in our podcast family, you're very familiar with, by now you're familiar with Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan. You're familiar with Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, an army of 44,000 coaches in 165 plus countries. We're familiar with the new brand, Maxwell Leadership, not John Maxwell Company. It's really a me to we move that we're in, Becky.
It is.
You and I, and even our podcast family, all of you leaning in, you're helping us go from me to we, because we've been a persona brand, the John Maxwell Company, and we're becoming a philosophy brand, Maxwell Leadership, a way to do great leadership.
Yeah.
We're going from founder,
And in every organization, if you're going to sustain, you're going to have to extend, succeed beyond the founder. And we're in the middle of going from founder to foundation. It's a me to a we move. You've heard us talk about content, our thought leaders. The people that we have brought on our team, we've had them on this podcast, Jeff Henderson, we've had Tim Elmore, we've had Joel, we have Don Yeager is one of our incredible thought leaders. We've had these thought leaders that come in, and that's a me to a we move for John and for our leadership. We have these guides in our Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan, and that's a me to a we. So many times we see, who's your mentor? John. Well, we're establishing other mentors that know the Maxwell philosophy. And it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy as an organization. Guess what? It's not easy as a leader either to move from me to we. But it's necessary to expand and extend.
And it's definitely an intention in everything that we do. And starting from John to Mark through every person that's a part of Maxwell Leadership, it is just a natural intention every single day to be able to grow that, including our podcast. I mean, we go from vision to vision casters to vision carriers. I mean, even this testimonial of being able to apply that, you see that every single day. And living it out are two different things. And it takes a team to be able to produce all of that.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.